In the last chapter, we learned how to interact with different types of web elements. We learned how to send text to them, how to click on them, how to get text from them, and we saw that there were various other methods as well. However, there are several more advanced types of interactions that we have not yet to cover. Let's look at several of those in this chapter. Let's look at hovering, for example. So on our test application, let's go ahead and click on this hovers link. And we see here we have 3 pictures. If I hover over them, there's a name and a link that appears, and each one is different. However, as we saw on the web element object, these are the only methods that are available. So there is no method here to say to hover over this. However, there is an additional class in the Selenium WebDriver package that will allow us to work with this. So let's go ahead and create a new test. And this test will click on the hovers page, come to this first image, hover over it, and ensure that the name user1 appears and also that this view profile link appears. Okay, so on our home page, our very first step that we need to do is to add a click on this hovers link. So let's add that. We know that we already have our home page class, so we go there and we are going to add a new method to click on the hovers link. So we'll say public. We know we want to return the hovers page because we're going to change pages. And then we'll say click hovers. And we can make a call to click link and just pass the hovers text. And then we return this new hovers page and we pass the driver to the hovers page class. Now, of course, we haven't created the hovers page class, so let's do that now. This goes in our framework under pages. So let's say new Java class and hovers page. We'll add our WebDriver and add our constructor. And of course, we need to import our WebDriver. Let's do that. So now we're on the hovers page. Let's go back to our application and see what we need to do. So our test has clicked hovers. We're on the hovers page. Now we want to hover over this first image. Now again, I told you that web element doesn't have a method to do a hover. However, there is a class available called actions. And the actions class contains a lot of advanced type actions that you can use for this sort of thing. So let's go ahead and create an actions object in our hovers page class. So we'll make a method that says to hover over figure. And since there are 3 figures in this class, we can allow them to pass in an index. So which one of these figures would you like us to hover over? So let's go ahead and create the actions object. You see is under the Selenium interactions package. And again, this class contains advanced interactions for your web elements. We'll name this object actions and we'll go ahead and import that class. And then we'll say new actions. Now actions takes a WebDriver object, so we passed in the driver that we have. Now that we have the actions, we see that there are multiple methods here. There's move to element, and that's what we're going to use in order to hover over an element. So this is going to move the mouse to that element. We see an overloaded move to element method that takes the X and Y coordinates, and then we see drag and drop. And then there's the click ones as well as click and hold. There's context click, so that if we wanted to do a right click, there's double click, key down, key up, pause, release, tick, send keys, and so on. So again, we want to do the hover, so we're going to use this move to element, which takes a web element. So we have to go ahead and find the web elements for that image. So let's go back to our application and figure out the locator for that web element. So I'm just going to inspect on this. And we see here there's an image and it has an alt as user avatar. Let's look at the next one. The next one has the same thing. So there are basically these three things and there's no unique identifier for it. So let's just use a generic locator which will get all of these elements, and we've already told our test to give us the index of the one that they want. So we can use find elements, get the list, and then get exactly the one that they want. Okay, so let's figure out a locator for this. There's these image ones, but then there's also a div right above it, and this one actually has a class. So if we find a div that has a class of figure and then get the image right under that, that should do it. So let's go ahead and get this div that has the class of figure, because not only does it have the image, but it also has this big caption, which contains that name and also the link that we're going to have to verify on. So this is a good locator. Okay, let's go back to our class and add that field. So we're going to do a by, and we'll call this one the figure box. And go ahead and import the by. And we'll say by class name and give it that figure. We'll go ahead here before our actions. And let's go ahead and create the web element for the figure that we want. So we'll go ahead and say web element. We'll call this figure equals, and we'll say driver.find elements. Of course, we don't want to use find element. Again, find element is only going to return the first element that it finds that matches the locator. So this would always just choose the first image. So even if our test said that it was looking for the second or the third one, it would only return the first one. That's why we need to use the find elements so that we can be sure to get the right one. So we say find elements and we give it the figure box. This will give us a list. We know right now it's 3 of them, so this will give us 3. And we have asked our test to give us the index of the one that we want here. Indexes with lists start with 0. So we would need to either go ahead with that same convention, but the test would need to know to pass in 0, or our test, whoever writes it, might think, okay, I need to pass in the first one, and they pass in a 1. So in this case, there could be a little confusion. We're going to add a Java doc, just so that our tests are clear what we want to pass in. And we'll go ahead and take care of the math of that within this method itself. So we have a list here. Now we're going to say get, and this takes an index. So whatever they passed in, let's say they passed in 1, we know that they mean the first one, but lists start at 0, so we can say index minus 1. So if they have passed in the number 1, meaning they want the first one, we say get 1 minus 1, which would equal 0, because the list indexes start at 0. Okay, so we have our web element. Now let's go to the move to element, and we can pass in this figure. So this should move our mouse to that figure, which will cause the hover action to occur. This alone is not going to do the action, because the actions class uses what's called the builder pattern. And what the builder pattern allows you to do is chain multiple method calls and then execute them all at once. So for this actions, I might want it to do a move to the element, and then I could do a dot and put any other method calls I wanted to. Once I've chained together all of the ones that I want, then I can simply call this perform, and then it will execute. Okay, so now that we've done the action, we're going to want to get that caption that appears. Let's go back to our app. So when we hover here, we get this username and this view profile. So this is a bit tricky. If we were hovering over this and only one thing appeared like this text, then we could just return that one string. However, there's 2 things that are appearing here. Now, if we look at this, this is under a fig caption div. So we could return this entire div. However, this is going to be a web element. And remember, we don't want to return web elements to our test methods. So we need to perhaps create something else to model this, some type of class to model the Fig caption. And under that class, we can then have access to this title and this link. That way our test can verify this. All right, let's go back to our framework and figure out how we're going to do this. So in the framework, we could create another page for the figure caption. However, figure caption is not a page, so that doesn't make sense to put that there. It's still a part of this hovers page. So we could create like a model or a component. So that would be like another package under here. And that might be a good practice if that figure image appears in more than one page. Since it's only appearing here in the hovers page so far, what I'm going to do is create an inner class inside of this hovers page for the figure caption. Now, this is just one approach. Again, you could do other approaches if you like. For right now, this one seems to make the most sense, especially since this hovers page doesn't have many actions. The only real thing that you can do on this page is to hover over a figure. So this class is really small as it is. So it wouldn't really hurt to add this inner class here and then keep all of this kind of within one. Inside of the hovers page itself, we're going to create another class, and we'll call this one figure caption. And then this inner class will need a constructor that accepts this web element. So let's add that. And we'll go ahead and make a field for this as well. And then we can assign it. Okay, so when we hover over the figure, let's go ahead and grab this caption element and we'll return a figure caption back to our test. So let's do that. And we already have our div, which is the figure. So we can say figure dot. And remember I told you in previous chapters that if you have a web element, you can find children or descendant elements by just doing a find element from that element. So instead of doing driver.find element, which will take it from the top of the DOM, we're going to do figure.find element, which will find it just from within this element itself. Let's go back and look at the DOM. So again, this is the original element. So we're going to say from here, find the Fig caption. Because remember, Fig caption appears more than one time. So we don't want to get this from the DOM. We want to say from this web element, drill down and find its caption. Now notice its caption appears in the DOM even if it doesn't appear here. So within our test, we're definitely going to want to make sure that this is displayed. So let's go ahead and get this. And back to the code, we want to find this element. So let's go ahead and add that element here. And we'll call this one the box caption. And this was also by class name. So we pass our class name. And then we can say find the caption. And we change the return type here. So we've hovered over this. We've returned the caption. Now inside of this inner class, we know that there are two fields that we care about, that header and that link. So let's go ahead and create some by objects within this figure caption. So we'll say private by header, and let's go ahead and get that locator. So this header, there's no unique identifier here, but we see that there is a tag name. So since we already have this element, we can just drill down and say, give me the H5 element under here. So let's go ahead and add that. You can say by, and this time let's use tag name, and we can say H5. And for the link, it's the same thing. Let's double check. The link, again, yep, there are no identifiers really here. There's this href, but let's go ahead and just use the tag name since that's the only one under the fig caption. So again, by tag name and then a. Okay, so let's create some methods. So what do we want to know? Well, in our test, we're going to want to know if the caption is displayed, of course. So let's go ahead and create a method for that. This will be a Boolean return type. So it'll say, yes, it's displayed, or no, it's not. And let's call this is caption displayed. And we'll return that caption is displayed. So that's a web element, and this is another interaction method available on web element that we're now exercising. And then let's say that it is displayed. That's going to be one of our checks. We're also going to want to know what's the title. So we're going to want to make sure that's right. So let's then say public will return a string, get title is the name of the method. And we'll say return, and we'll use our caption object and then do find element under there and then say header. So we're going to find the header that's under that caption object, and then from there we'll say let's go ahead and get the text of that. And then likewise we're going to want to get the link as well. So we could do get the link itself, and we could also do get the link text. So let's go ahead and add both of these here. We'll make the first one get link, and this one will return the caption.find element. This time we pass in the link. And then let's look at this element again to see how we get the link. So we see here there's this href that has the link, and href is an attribute on this element. So we can use that get attribute method. So we can say dot get attribute, and we give it the attribute of href. So then this will return us this link. And actually it won't just be the user's one. You see when I hover over this that it is the whole link right here. So that's what will be returned to us. So let's just note that for now. And we'll create another method to get the link text. So this one is also returning a string. We say get link text, and we'll return the caption that find element, pass in the link, and this time we say get the text of that link. All right, so that is the inner class. You see this entire class is still not too long, right? We have this inner class that will be returned when we hover over this. Let's go ahead and create our test now. So I'm going to go to the test area, and let's create a new package under here that we will call hover. And we'll create a new class inside of here called hover test. And this will extend our base test. And we'll create a new test inside of here. And we'll call this one test hover user 1. So we have our home page. We want to click hovers, right? This will give us a hovers page object. So let's just say hovers page. And then from here, we can do hovers page dot and say hover over the figure. And we said that this is user 1, so we could go ahead and pass in 1. Okay, this will then return us the figure caption, that inner class that we created. So we'll just call this caption. And now we can do our assertions. So we want to assert that, of course, the caption is displayed. So we can do assert true, and we can say caption dot is caption displayed, and then give it a message. Once we make sure the caption is actually displayed, then we can continue on with some additional assertions. So now we want to make sure the title of the caption is correct. So let's do that. And I'm going to change this import to import all of the ones. So for assert equals, we're going to say caption dot get title. And we're going to compare that with the title in our app. So let's go ahead and copy paste that so we make sure we have the right title. So this title for figure 1, and let's just make sure that's the right one. Yep. Okay. So for this one, we'll just copy this there. So after we make sure the title is right, let's go ahead and make sure that the link text is right. So this again, we'll do assert equals, and we'll say caption dot get link text, and we'll compare that with the link text in our app. So let's grab that, and this says view profile. So we'll copy this there. And then let's add one final assertion to make sure that the link is okay. So remember, that link is going to be the entire absolute link. I don't want to hard code that entire link in, because let's say that this URL changed. For example, what if it was an HTTPS, but on a different server, it might be HTTP. Or let's say that, just our domain name or something like this changed or whatever. So using this relative path is all I really want, this users one. So I'm going to just get the entire link, and then I'm just going to make sure that that entire link ends with this text. So let's do that instead. So we'll say assert true, and then we'll say caption dot get link ends with, and then we can pass in the users one and then a message. All right, so there is our test. Let's go ahead and run it. All right, and we see that that did pass. So it's a good practice to also test your test and make sure that it fails when it needs to fail, right? So in our case, what has me hung up a little bit is this caption piece. So since that caption already exists in the DOM, I'm not sure if this is caption displayed will always just return true. It shouldn't, but I'm not 100% sure of that. So what I want to do is I want to actually go here, and let's not hover over that image when we call this. And then let's make sure that it'll actually fail. Our test will fail and say that this is not displayed if I move the mouse. Okay, so I'm going to debug, put this in debug mode. So I put a breakpoint right here, and I'm going to run it in debug mode so that I can move the mouse off of this when this is called. All right, let's run it. Okay, we're at the breakpoint. Let's open our app. We see that it's hovered. I'm just going to move the mouse right now so that it's no longer hovering this. All right, now let's continue with our test. And great, we see that the test failed. Let's make sure it says why. Yes, caption not displayed. Okay, great. So now we know that that's working how we want it to. Perfect. So that was advanced interactions using the actions class. There's no optional exercise for this chapter, at least not right now. I'm going to couple the actions exercise with the chapter on pop-ups. So you'll have an optional exercise in that chapter that will cover this as well as the alerts.